he cursed on Monday, and it has withered. Then Jesus' authority is questioned by the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He tells the parable of the two sons. He tells the parable of the vine dressers. He tells the parable of the wedding feast. He's questioned again about paying taxes. This is where, whose image is on the coin? Well, then give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. He's questioned about the resurrection. This is where the Sadducees come in and they say, a certain man had a wife, and he died, and she married his brother, and he had 7 brothers. They all married her. At the resurrection, whose wife is she?
The first.
And Jesus said, you don't understand the scriptures or the power of God, you fools. I had that part. He says, in the resurrection there is neither marriage nor given in marriage. So in other words, no one's wife. So it's, again, these are questions trying to trick and trap Jesus in these seemingly theological conundrums. And he keeps just shooting them down. It's hilarious. They come up and they say, should we pay taxes?
The answer is about 2 miles.
2 miles.
Or 15 stadia.
15, okay, 2 miles. So, walking, you can walk 2 miles in what, about an hour? If you walk slow.
Yeah, but they had calves and stuff.
That's right. Jesus was used to walking all over Israel. I mean, he walked from Galilee to Jerusalem and all over the place. So he probably made it in under, yeah, probably about a half an hour. Yeah, probably about a half an hour away. So, the scribes questioned him about what's the greatest commandment. And Jesus said to love the Lord your God with the whole heart, soul, strength, body, and mind. And the second is like the first, to love your neighbor as yourself. And they said, you've done well, teacher. He said, well, thank you. He kind of wrote the commandment, Then he talks about the widow's mite. And it's this day at the end around, I want to say around this time, probably a little earlier. He talks about his second coming. He gives his last sermon. It's called the Olivet Discourse. It's the last sermon Jesus will give. And he talks about basically his second coming and the destruction of Jerusalem. And he does this from the Mount of Olives, because from the Mount of Olives he looks at the temple. And the disciples are, oh, isn't it beautiful and all this? And he says, not one stone will be left on top of another. It'll all be brought down. And the disciples said, well, when will this happen, Lord? And he tells them. And he basically predicts the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem within one generation. Yes, that's part of the abomination of desolation, which Luke interprets for us as meaning the Roman armies that will surround and destroy Jerusalem. And that happened exactly 40 years, I would say, to the day that Jesus gave that sermon. Exactly one generation from that time, he predicted. And then he tells the parable of the talents and the sheep and the goats. This is where we get that discourse, in the end, he'll say to the righteous, well done, come into the glory of your master's kingdom. And they'll say, when did we see you hungry, etc., when you did the least of it? This all happens today. This is today when all of that happens. Okay? And again, the scriptures that are related to this, the only one that doesn't record this is John. All of the others, look at this. I mean, all of this today. What happens Wednesday? What happens tomorrow? This is when the Sanhedrin plot to kill Jesus, and Judas agrees to betray him. This is why under the old calendar, you want to call it the old calendar, during Lent, all Catholics were to abstain from meat on Wednesdays as well as Fridays. because it's in honor of the day that Judas agreed to betray Jesus. And then, of course, Thursday begins the Holy Triduum, the 3 days. And there's the preparation for the Passover, the feast. They argue over who's the greatest. He washes the disciples' feet. He identifies Judas. He institutes the Last Supper. He gives them the commandment of love. He predicts Peter's denial. And he gives his discourse in the upper room. That's mainly from the Gospel of John. And it's a discourse on love one another. This is what I'm telling you to do, guys. Yes?
So, as a group, I'm sure all of us would love a copy of that. Could you email it?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Now, you notice on here, I like this, it has a little clock. It tells roughly the time in which this occurred.
Wow.
3 o'clock. Great picture.
3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, etc. See?
I have a question.
Yes.
Chip, have you had the idea of understanding that there were 12-hour days during that time?
12-hour days?
Yeah.
The day and the night was determined by sunrise and sunset. It still is by Jews today. Once sunset occurs, it's the next day.
Yeah.
So on Friday at sunset, they stop work because it's now the Sabbath.
So that would kind of explain the 3 days.
Yes, it does explain the 3 days because they marked the number of days differently than we do. It's not a full 24-hour period. What we would consider a part of a day is considered a full day. So that's how Jesus could be 3 days and rise again on Sunday morning and still be 3 days.
And that's why the 3rd hour, 6th hour, and 9th hour are so powerful.
Yes, because those correspond to our 12, 3, etc. So from 6 p.m. is when they roughly had Passover. So then he departs the upper room. About midnight, Jesus is praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's betrayed, and at 3 a.m. he's before Caiaphas. So from the time of the Last Supper, Jesus has no sleep. He is just tried and tortured back and forth. He gets certainly no food, no water, he's just tortured from that point on. That was his last meal, if you will. And by 6 a.m., Jesus is before Pilate. He is scourged and mocked. By 9 a.m., Pilate consents to the death of Jesus. And by 12 p.m., Jesus is on the cross for this last 3 hours. I was mistaken. I said 6 earlier. He died in 3 hours. And then when does he die? 3 p.m., which was the same time as what? The evening sacrifice that they were doing in the temple. The lambs were being slain in the temple when the Lamb of God who was killed was on the cross. Coincidence? No. Everything happens according to God's timetable. I'm telling you, to the hour. And if you remember our study in Daniel, those of you who have been around that long, you remember when Daniel was praying during the time of the evening sacrifices when he got his vision of the 70 weeks. It was the same hour. That's when Gabriel appeared to him. So 3 o'clock is a powerful hour, and it has been since our Jewish history. That was the time of the evening sacrifice. Why that time? Because it was anticipating what? Jesus' death. And now, looking back on the cross, Sister Faustina tells us that's the hour of mercy. That at 3 o'clock, if you can remember, send up a little prayer. She called it a little ejaculation. Say, Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Something like that at that, because it's a holy hour. It's a holy hour. And it has been holy like I said, since Moses instituted the sacrificial system in anticipation of Jesus. You following me here? So, he dies, he's buried. The only thing I don't like about this is that what happens on Saturday? The women observe the Sabbath day. There's more that happens on Holy Saturday. Jesus descends to the dead. In our creed we say he descended into hell. It's during Holy Saturday, Jesus is still working. Everyone else is resting because it's the Sabbath, but Jesus is working. Working for what? The liberation of the holy souls in preparation to liberate them from the grave, from the bosom of Abraham, the limbo of the fathers, whatever you want to call it, liberate them and send them into heaven. That's what happens on Holy Saturday. Jesus liberates the holy souls. He descended into hell. And then, Sunday, he rises from the tomb. And so, of course, every gospel says that. And what I also like about this, not only the timetable, but it also shows where Jesus is during this time. Okay, so you know where it's happening. And you have all four gospels paralleling the story, if you will. Okay? So I just wanted to share that, and yes, I will pass it along to everyone in an email.
Did Jesus actually eat that Last Supper? Because I thought he sort of broke the bread.
No, he ate it with them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
He says quite clearly, I had eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you. He partook of it himself. And Scott Hahn does an elaborate teaching on this called The Fourth Cup. If you've ever heard it, it's well worth it. I'm sure you can get it online or get it through St. Joseph Communications. I'm sure it's in CD form. In fact, I know it's in CD form because I've seen it on their catalog. It's called The Fourth Cup, where he talks about which part of the Jewish Seder did Jesus institute the Eucharist. And if I'm not mistaken, he instituted it on the third cup, but doesn't partake of the fourth cup. There are 4 cups in a Jewish Seder of wine that you drink throughout the meal. And they all have signification. And the third cup, if I'm not mistaken, is called the cup of redemption. And it's that cup that he says, this is the cup of my blood. Which would make sense in a Jewish ceremony. That was the cup of redemption. This is really redemption. What you had was just a shadow. Now you have the substance. You were going to say, Robert?
I would just comment that I think that his Scott Hahn's discovery or understanding of that would let his conversion. It may well have. I'm not certain about that. But I know I've heard I heard his message on the fourth cup. So if you're interested in the relationship between the Jewish Seder, the Passover meal, and the Last Supper and the Mass, I would strongly recommend that. I don't even want to pretend to do it justice. He does well enough on his own with that. So I would strongly recommend The Fourth Cup by Scott Hahn. You can get that through St. Joseph Communication. It probably is on the net somewhere, even for free, if you don't want to buy the CD.
You said that cup is redemption?
I'm sorry?
You said that cup is a redemption?
The cup of redemption,
That's
yes.
correct, because I attended a Seder sometime not too long ago, and they mentioned the fourth cup is Thanksgiving.
Ah, okay.
So the third is redemption, the second one is plagues and some darkness in Egypt, and then the first one is the Kadesh.
Ah, okay. I'm not sure. I'm not up on my
It's
Hebrew.
two
I do know that I believe when you mentioned the plagues in the second cup, it's during the second cup that the Jews honor, or they give, I guess honor is the word for the plagues, and so you spill 10 drops of wine,
Yes.
and I've seen them do it with their little finger. They'll put their finger in the wine and they'll drop, and they'll name in Hebrew each of the plagues.
Yes.
that befell Egypt, and that's to say.
That's how I remember.
Ah, excellent. It's been
Hold on one second, I have to take that down.
it's been literally decades since I've been to a Jewish Seder, and the last time it happened, it was in my old church, and they did it. It was a Jew for Jesus, a converted Jew, and he led us through all of the Seder parts, and we enacted it like the way Jesus would have. So there were no chairs. We all reclined on the floor on pillows. You know, and I thought that was quite an interesting experience to eat. No silverware. We used the matzo to help scoop up the food. In modern Jewish fashion, we did not have lamb. We had roast turkey because modern Jews do not have lamb during Passover. Why? No priest. And you would take the lamb to the temple, slaughter it, take it home, roast it, and eat it. You can't do that nowadays. Why? No temple. There's not, you can't do that. There's no priesthood, no temple. So what do? Well, they improvise. Since we can't actually have lamb, that seems wrong to do that if there's no temple and no priesthood. They substitute it with kosher food. Sometimes they have brisket, I've been told, beef. Sometimes what I had was roast turkey. But yeah, they do. Now, the plate of Elijah that they have, they do put a lamb shank in honor, in remembrance of back in the day, if you will, we would be eating lamb. But since there's no temple, this is what we're going to do to remember that. So it's interesting how the Jewish tradition, the Jewish ceremony, the celebration of Passover has evolved. The Passover that Jews celebrate today would not be the same Passover that Jesus would have celebrated. They had lamb. Modern Jews don't, because there's no temple, no priesthood. And so nowadays the Jews mourn over that loss.